Hello. Two of my sort of favourite people, really. Two of my, what should we call them, frenemies, have been, one has been on the television and the other one has popped up on the internet, and I'm so excited to see them. They were very much in my mind when I was doing The Circle. I can't really explain why Mr. Farage and Anne Widdicombe were so much in my mind, but I promise that they were. So Mr. Farage has been taken on by GBTV in a hope that finally he's going to turn GBTV into a success. I hope he does. But certainly by his performance this evening, I don't see very much evidence that he can. This was one of the most clod-hopping, useless interviews I think I have ever witnessed. And he was interviewing a man from Amnesty International, a man called Steve something Simmons. He's the Refugee and Asylum Rights Director. Now, frankly, most of what this fellow said was absolutely bang on the nail, and Mr. Farage clearly had not done his work, so he didn't know. He seemed surprised, frankly, by what Steve actually said. So he starts off, he's looking at asylum seekers, and should ordinary people help those individuals who are, or those groups of people who are crossing the channel in a boat. And there's an organisation called Channel Rescue. So Farage says, well, we asked them if they would come on, and we asked them some questions and they haven't replied, but they're still welcome. Who cares? If they're not there, it's not relevant. And this man from Amnesty was able to say, well, the sensible approach would be to call the RNLI, because these people with the lifeboats, they are professionals and they're used to rescuing people at sea. Perfectly reasonable. Then Farage goes on to confuse smuggling with trafficking. And I was just despairing, really. So again, the Amnesty fellow was able to point out, quite rightly, that the smugglers, these dreadful people who have taken money from migrants and asylum seekers, people who want to cross the channel, or people who actually want to want to move from one country to another, and they paid huge amounts of money, and they're not given, and they've since run away. 1 minute. Yeah, come on, stop it. The smugglers have run away. If they were traffickers, they would still be here, and they would be exploiting, abusing, and controlling the people that they bring to this country. That is the difference. And Mr. Farage should have done his work. He hadn't. He then mentioned that about 20,000 people had made the crossing from France to Britain, and then suggested that the greater number of these were illegal and were not proper asylum seekers. Well, again, the Amnesty man was able to say quite rightly that not only almost 50% of claimants have been given asylum and have seen their claims accepted, it's gone up to about 2/3. So the majority of people who are coming to this country illegally are proven to be worthy asylum seekers. And the sea journeys which they take are dangerous, but at the same time, those people who take those sea journeys, those people who risk everything, their claims are disproportionately high. Off you go, go on. So Mr. Farage wants to talk about the difference between genuine asylum seekers and economic migrants. And he hasn't done his work. Otherwise, he would have had a more incisive debate with the Amnesty man. There are questions we could have asked Amnesty. For example, I know that Amnesty, like many NGOs, is enmired in controversy, is enmired in corruption. Yes, it does a spectacular job, but at what cost? It has a bureaucracy of its own, which is sometimes impossible to wade through. I personally have experience of an extremely corrupt amnesty office in another country, which I can talk about at another time. Now, the amnesty man, again, was able to point out to Mr. Farage that, well, whatever we might say about migrants flooding into this country, France takes 4 times the number of asylum seekers that we take. And that is something that we have to consider. We have to consider Priti Patel's appalling division of asylum seekers and migrants into good asylum seekers and bad asylum seekers. The good ones take acceptable routes, which haven't actually been defined. If we had routes to get to this country, life would be safer. Life would be more controlled. We wouldn't have people risking their lives on the channel. And then Priti Patel is also now talking about talking about ignoring those people who come here in a bad way, maybe because that is the only way that they could come here. And we then ignore the connection that these people have already with Britain. This is a gift, by the way, to traffickers and smugglers, because that is the only way they're going to get here. Anyone seeking asylum should be able to claim asylum according to the 1951 Convention. This is quite clear. Anybody seeking asylum should be able to claim asylum in their intended destination or in any safe country. Now that is a phrase, a sentence in the 1951 Convention which is overlooked by Priti Patel, by Nigel Farage, by Widdicombe, and by so many of these people who are shrill and senseless. They haven't read their texts. And you can't have a proper debate with somebody if you haven't prepared. Nigel Farage didn't prepare. What he accepted was some sort of propaganda rubbish, and he thought that that would be enough to conduct an interview. For God's sake, man, do the work. There's a protocol, the 1967 protocol, and the Dublin Protocol or the Dublin Convention. Now, where the problem occurs is in the Dublin Convention, which says the Dublin Convention is about European countries and about the Schengen area, which says that if you enter the European area, the European territory, you must claim asylum in the first safe country, the first country that you get to. That, of course, has led to a disproportionate amount of asylum seekers making their claims in Greece, and Greece being completely unable to deal with that, because it doesn't have the superstructure to deal with a huge influx of asylum seekers. This is where Mrs. Merkel got involved after 2015, because she saw that it was impossible for Greece to process all of these applications. I know how badly Greece processed applications because I was there in the early 2000s and I saw it with my own eyes. It was not prepared even then to process the smaller number of applications that came through. People were left on the streets with waving pink cards and not knowing what to do because there was no structure. So much worse now. And it's not really Greece's fault. It's the fault of Europe in not setting up a proper system for processing people. And it's, to a certain extent, the fault of the Dublin Protocol for that idea that you have to apply in the first European state that you enter, however you enter it. Now, we are no longer signed up to the Dublin Convention because we have left Europe. So for Anne Widdicombe, for Priti Patel, and for various other people to claim, Farage to claim, that it is legally binding to seek asylum in the first safe country that you come to, and not to come here, that coming to the UK is illegal, this is complete rubbish. They haven't read the laws. They aren't aware of what they're talking about. It is rubbish. Article 31, to go on, bans punishing asylum seekers in any way who come directly to your country or come directly to their intended destination or to a safe country that can host them and present their appeal for asylum without delay. That is the convention of Article 31. So putting people in prison, this is actually transgressing Article 31. This is against international law. It's not against European law specifically, it's against international law. Now, Australia may have done it. I'd like your comments about the Australian system and whether or not you think the Australian system is correct. Anne Widdicombe. I said I'd talk about Anne Widdicombe. Anne Widdicombe. At one point there was a possibility of doing a little program with Anne Widdicombe, and somehow it didn't happen. I would have so looked forward to that. I like Anne Widdicombe as a person. I do think she's ridiculous as a politician, and I am quietly pleased that she seems to have sort of that's really her voice, isn't it? That sort of squeak. I'm Anne Widdicombe, and she says we should put all people who come here as migrants or asylum seekers, we should put them in secure reception centres. And she's been saying that she's been advancing this as a concept since 1999. And then she says that not me, not only me, but not Oliver Letwin also advanced this. And David Cameron dropped it. Don't know why. And so the idea that Priti Patel has suddenly come up with the idea of secure reception centres is not new. This is quite an old system. Priti Patel is just raking up old ideas. And she comes up with idea after idea to sort out a problem which is a serious issue and which needs to be looked at by serious journalists, by serious politicians who are not spouting propaganda, who have actually done their work and who have actually read the international conventions, the laws that we have signed up to uphold. Because if they haven't done that job, then they're not actually worth their office. So Anne Widdicombe gave an interview, I think last week. I saw it today, and it is extraordinary. She says that these I don't want to call them prisons. I call them secure reception centres because there will be children involved. She says that these secure reception centres will act as a deterrent. They because we have no national ID cards, so once migrants come to this country, they can immediately leave the place that they've been put and go out into the community, and they will be lost. And if they're held in a pen, like cattle, then genuine applicants will be processed and identified quickly. Rubbish. We know about genuine applicants because Australia has pretty well the system that Priti Patel is trying to advance. If we don't know what we're doing, and most of the time we don't, Priti Patel and the current British government looks across to Australia and they say, what's Australia doing? Well, let's do the same thing. Now, in Australia, they send people off to two little islands in Papua New Guinea if they have arrived in Australia by what is considered an unlawful route. So at that point, they're literally dumped there. And actually, the Australian governments in the last few years have taken the view that they will never give asylum to people who have come through this unlawful route and who have been housed on Manus Island or Nauru. In fact, quite a number of people have been resettled in Cambodia. Since 1992, Australia has had a principle of detention for anybody whose visa runs out or anybody who hasn't got a proper visa. Detention, prison. And we ask How does that work with Article 31? I don't see how that works with Article 31. I'd long for somebody to actually write down and tell me how that policy, how that law fits in with Article 31 and with the 1951 Convention and the 1967 Protocol about claiming asylum. There are stories in Australia about people who have entered Australia as asylum seekers legally, nevertheless being left in detention for 8 years or more. And, you know, what can they do? As for the Manus prison situation, there's a fellow called Behrouz Bouchani who's written quite an interesting book about it. It's worth reading. And if you want the Australian prison, if you want the Australian asylum system light, as a lighter way of looking at it, there's a really good Netflix television series with Kate Blanchett, and because Kate Blanchett was in it, it attracted some top level, some real heavy acting power, and it's called Stateless. It is superb. Now, my gripe here, I'm trying as hard as I possibly can to be as fair to both sides. My gripe is that Farage, who is supposed to be this rescuer of GBTV, has not done his work. And Farage was left looking lost. I think somebody who does their work would not be lost. Equally, Anne Widdicombe has not done her work. She clearly has not looked at the policies which now operate because we have left the European Union and because the Dublin Convention is no longer relevant to us. So we can't hide behind that idea that a migrant must claim asylum in the first country. We also can't actually take that propaganda as fact that we are swamped by illegal migrants and asylum seekers. It simply isn't true. And asylum seekers who are not, who have no possibility of their claim being accepted. It simply isn't true. The majority of asylum seekers who arrive in the UK are granted asylum because their claims are justified. That is the fact. And anything else is propaganda and rubbish. I would really like to take on Mr. Farage and Anne Widdicombe on their own territory. I would like to find out if there is a point at which we can meet and discuss these issues. I'd like to take on Priti Patel and discuss these issues without all the wallpaper. When Father plastered the wallpaper, you know, it's just nonsense. The mother was stuck to the ceiling, the children were stuck to the floor. I've never seen such a family so stuck up before. It's rubbish. This is the sort of rubbish that we are hearing about this very serious and horrifying humanitarian problem that is reaching out across the world. It's become like some sort of farcical song that you would sing in the music hall. Because the people who are discussing this, the people who are presenting the laws, the people who are supposed to be journalists or news anchors, again, I worry about that word, have not done their work or are reading from some sort of auto cue. They haven't actually mastered their brief. So I appeal. I really do appeal. This is a subject that needs debate. I will probably come back to it again at some point, if you don't mind. And do by all means follow my site, follow Zontal Films Limited, and ring the bell. Ring the bell. You ring the bell so that you know when I'm posting a new video, and you're ready, poised and ready with a comment. So please, I look forward to your comments. And as I say, I'm really interested if somebody can tell me about the Australian system and how the Australian system squares itself with the 1951 Convention, the 1967 Protocol, and Article 31 in particular about punishing asylum seekers, because I would have thought keeping people in what amounts to a prison, even if it's what Anne Widdicombe would call a secure reception centre, it is nevertheless behind bars, and I would defy anybody who thinks that you can be kept there and not feel that you are being punished. So I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Bye bye.